let me just play devil's advocate a little bit on behalf of some of the food scientists and industry people that we've talked to. It seems like the reason to prevent people from seeing those videos or making those videos is because viewers tend to anthropomorphize. So when we see a dog acting a certain way, we tend to think, oh, it's got these quasi-human traits, and we think it's our friend, and we have these emotions towards it. And we're liable to do that too with respect to other non-human animals. But this just reflects an incredible misunderstanding on the part of the viewer and on the part of the activist who is presenting this to the viewer. I mean, these animals, again, I'm playing devil's advocate, these animals are not humans. We don't really know how their brains function. We do know that they're herding animals. Cows will often choose to stand together even when they're allowed out on pasture. So confining them together, especially when it's cold, isn't necessarily doing something bad like it would be for us. We would feel terrible being stuck in those confined operations, but maybe they don't. And, you know, the pigs, they can tend to be pretty mean to one another, and the ones lower on the totem pole will not get the same kind of resources or have their piglets protected if they don't have everybody, as it were, in these pens where they can't move, and they can also have exactly the same amount of food and the right kind of nutrients and antibiotics. Chickens, when they're let to run free, tend to establish a pecking order. You get them attacking one another. The weaker ones end up probably in more pain than if they were in battery cages. Production goes down. So there are all these reasons, both from the point of view of animal husbandry and from the point of view of efficiency, to take the methods that the factory farmers do. And these videos aren't helpful because either they focus on the one or two bad apples, or they seem to anthropomorphize and think that animals are like us and suffer in conditions where we would be suffering.
There's a lot of questions in there, Andrew, and I'm
Yeah,
going to try to get to all of them to the
okay.
best of my memory. So, first and foremost, chickens and turkeys, pigs and cattle, these animals are individuals. Just like the dogs and the cats who we welcome into our homes and into our families, these animals have personalities. They have likes, they have dislikes, and most importantly, they want to avoid suffering. Upton Sinclair said that it's difficult to get someone to understand something that their job requires them not to understand.
Hmm.
That's often the case with the meat industry proponents of the arguments that you were just making as a devil's advocate,
Yeah.
is that they are not capable of accepting that what they're doing is causing enormous animal suffering. The fact is that we don't have to guess as to what the mental states of these animals are like. We just need to look at the science. And the science is quite clear that it confirms what our common sense has already told us, that animals who are built to move should be able to move.
Good.
For example, in preference tests, when you give pigs and chickens the ability to have access to more space than what they're given to on factory farms, they're willing to work to gain access to that increased space. The prestigious Pew Commission on Industrial Farm Animal Production, this blue ribbon panel, including the Secretary of Agriculture, veterinarians, animal scientists, farmers, and more, studied these very issues for 2.5 years,
Hmm.
traveling the country, interviewing farmers, interviewing scientists, touring farms, and unanimously, at the end of their study, every single one of the commissioners from the Secretary of Agriculture on down concluded that we need to get rid of battery cages for laying hens, we need to get rid of gestation crates for pigs, and get rid of veal crates for calves, and so on. We're not talking about anomalies here. We're not talking about just a few rotten apples. We're talking about standard industry practices that are simply rotten. It is just a fact that most of the breeding pigs in our country are kept in tiny crates where they can barely move an inch their whole life. The same thing for egg laying hens. In the chicken meat industry, we have bred animals who've genetically manipulated them so dramatically that they grow so fat so fast that many of them have difficulty even walking more than a few pitiful steps before they collapse underneath their own unnatural bulk.
Right.
This is just playing God with these animals in a type of way that's so detrimental to them that they've essentially become prisoners in their own bodies.
Hmm.
These chickens and turkeys who we raise for meat have been bred to suffer. You could put them out on a green pasture with sun on their back, and they still would be suffering because of their enormous bodies that are just too big for their skeletal structures to uphold. So the practices that have become endemic within animal agriculture clearly cause enormous animal suffering.
Hmm.
Common sense shows it, and science affirms that common sense.